Good morning and welcome to Economy and Markets, where we give you a comprehensive insight into market and its corresponding activity. So, to kick off the show this morning, we are starting off with a conversation around MTN and its share price. On the 22nd of October, we saw MTN Nigeria PLC, MTN Nigeria Communications PLC hit the historic share price mark of 500 naira per share. 2 days later, October 24, it is currently at an all-time high of 515 naira per share. When you look at where MTN started from in May 2019 till date, MTN has now appreciated by a whopping 472%. The growth rate of MTN compared to the growth rate of the entire market all-share index is quite similar, as we see the NGX growing at 476%. in line with, also similar to MTN's 472%. Let's look at it this way. Since 2019, MTN listed 19 naira per share. If you look at the end of that year, the market, it appreciated to 105 naira per share. That was at the end of 2019. By the end of 2020, MTN was trading at 169 naira per share, because then in 2021 we saw MTN do a public offer where it raised around 111.75 billion naira. That public offer share price 169 naira. That year MTN entered the 200 naira region. However, let's come down to 2024. There was significant blowout for MTN. That stock lost around 24% of its 24% of its value, down to 200 naira per share. We even saw at some point in 2024, we saw the stock go down to as low as 169 naira 70 kobo. So we can see MTN has been laced with highs and lows. 6 years in the market, it's been a journey of highs and lows, and that's what we've come to discuss today on the show. And on the show this morning, I have Abigail Adishino, who is a research and insight analyst at Norrenberger Financial Group. Good morning, Abigail.
Good morning.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us on BusinessDay TV.
Pleasure.
Yeah, so MTN's share price recently hit its highest level this year. What key factors will you say have driven this rally?
Yes, so far, year-to-date gains of MTN is over 150%, which is more than double, even triple, really, of what the entire index, of what the entire Nigerian index has done so far this year. You know, the lowest MTN had gone, 52-week low, if you check that, is slightly below 200, about 196 naira. And now, last week, we saw MTN go above the 500 naira benchmark, closing Friday as at 515 naira. And lastly, this should be said to would tie this right to the investor, to a part of it to investor sentiment, because MTN has announced that they'll be releasing their Q3 2025 result on Thursday, 30th October. And you'd know that if you check MTN's H1 2025 result, it was an outstanding performance compared to what we had in H1 2024. Moving from negative performance to a profit after tax of over 400 billion. That is remarkable, and I'm sure that investors are now beginning to bet on MTN's performance, particularly for the result that's coming out on Thursday, 30th October, where their Q3 results. Likely what we've been seeing is pretty much investor sentiment and people placing in their bets towards a good performance.
So how does MTN's current market valuation compare to its peers? We have Airtel, we have Legend Internet, we have eTranzact. Basically, all the stocks that are listed in the ICT sector. How does MTN compare to them? Do you know that?
Yes, so pretty much MTN is the only stocks in the telecom sector that is under the premium board. If you check the NGX listing, you see that MTN is the only one under the premium board. However, other ones, Airtel, Chams, eTranzact, Legend, they've also done quite well, except Legend though. Legend has a negative year-to-date performance of about negative 2% thereabout. Although Legend went as high as 10 naira this year, but currently trading at 6 naira, right, around 6 naira levels. Airtel, usually when we see increase or a rally in a particular stock in the market in NGX, would usually see a FOMO effect on similar ones. So usually we should expect to see a FOMO effect on other ones. However, if you take them, let's take each of them for instance. If you start with Airtel is currently trading above 2,000. I don't think that can stand side by side with MTN trading in 500 levels. So people would not really want to say because MTN has gone too high, let me buy Airtel, because Airtel is on the high side right now. Airtel is above 2,000. It doesn't move much, but the share price is high. Now coming down to the likes of Chams, eTranzact, and Legend. Chams has also done well this year. I mean, Chams has done close to 100%, about 99% about year to date gains. So, but eTranzact as well. Transact over 100% actually. You cannot really, we can't place MTN side by side with all of them. Like I said earlier, MTN is the only one in the premium board, and MTN has proven to be masters in the game, particularly with their financials as well.
So you mentioned some particular stocks. I would say for eTranzact, will attribute some of their rallying to the news around them being the provider of the electronic receipt that FIRS is introducing from next year. The question I want to ask now is do you think that MTN stock performance, I mean 158% just this year, since MTN started listing, I don't think there's ever been any year where MTN rallied up to 158%. Is it more, are there fundamentals to back this growth, or is it just a sentiment-driven rally? What are your thoughts?
Well, I'll say it's a mixture of both investor sentiment and both their fundamentals. If you check their latest result, which is their H1 2025 performance, you'd see that, like I said earlier, that they moved from a negative, MTN in H1 2024 recorded a negative performance of over 500 billion loss, right? And now for H1 2025, now at about 400 billion profit after tax. That's quite remarkable, right? And also seeing their full year 2024 equity, the negative equity, right, in full year 2024, right? And then coming to a reduced, still negative equity, really, for H1 2025, but at a reduced figure, a reduced amount, right? That is quite encouraging. And that also shows that MTN might likely, there's also likelihood for dividend for some dividend payment, which is why a lot of investors are keying in now or taking position right now in order to benefit from the performance or the results that we have in Q3 2024, which is expected to be out on Thursday.
Now, I want to move to a question around their operating margins. Basically, we're seeing, okay, I would say inflation is quite tempering down. Energy prices probably tempering down. But when you look at their books, these pressures are still mounting on their margins. Do you have any idea how the company is able to manage the pressures of rising energy costs as well as inflation still doing inflation things?
So as of September, we have, of course, Nigeria inflation reduced and went below the 20% benchmark, 20% threshold, right? September we recorded 18.02% in inflation. And also if you check Q3 performance of inflation, of Nigerians FX rather, for the energy prices, I mean, you'd see that there was quite some rallying, some increase. We saw or we noticed some increase in September, right? Particularly as a result of the 3 days industrial strike, right, that went on. There was a bit of price scarcity and also gas scarcity, and there was also price hiking in that levels. So we expect that these things would impact their books, right? Even the reduction that we're beginning to notice in inflation might not reflect positively in their books yet. However, MTN they had some cost pushing or cost optimization technique that we saw in their books in H1 2025, and we expect that they would continue in that line or in that trend, helping them to pushing the net effect of increasing energy price or the inflationary pressures. We expect that inflationary pressures, energy price, and their cost optimization technique, the net effect of that should be a good one.
Much. Now Abigail, I have a question around institutional investors and MTN. Are you noticing any growing trends of interest from institutional investors in telecom equities? So for most of this year, we've seen retail investors. We've basically seen retail investors do a lot. They've pushed themselves hard this year. Institutional investors have also done quite the same. But are you noticing any trend of growing interest from those institutional investors in telecom equities like MTN?
And the telco sector is actually one of the sectors to look into. They're one of the viable sectors to look into at such a time as this. So institutional investors will really are the ones that you expect that they take position or invest in stable companies that has very strong fundamentals, which MTN and some telco companies seem to fall into this category. So yes, we expect that institutional investors have growing sentiment or growing investment towards the telco or telecommunication sector with this strong performance and good news that we're beginning to hear about them, like the likes of MTN, eTranzact, and the likes.
So a question I have is 515 naira per share. Do you think there are any more upsides for investors that want to look at MTN, or do you think MTN has probably hit its fair value at this point?
Well, I'll say that this is not the peak for MTN.
Okay.
I don't think this is the peak for MTN. Currently, the current share price of MTN is higher. It's very, very close to what we had estimated that they would achieve at the beginning of the year. So for them to already be 98% close to our target for the year means that I'm sure the target is going to increase, or the target price is going to increase by the time the Q3 result comes out. And there will still be we are open to seeing more upside, really, more upside for MTN. Maybe not so much, but for a very significant level. And like I said earlier, another key factor, contributing factor to the increase in their share price will be their dividend payments. We're expecting that MTN would, pay dividend this year. This year might not be this year rather, and particularly on the back of their and we expect that negative equity that they had in H1, which is reduced by the way, from what they recorded in H1 20, from what they recorded at the end of 2024, right? We're expecting that by this, when their result comes out, the previously negative equity would have reduced, which would give them, some very good grounds to pay dividend, right? And they've also had some very good numbers. I mean, their mobile subscriber base has been growing. Average revenue per user or per subscriber has also been growing, and also they've also have very, very, very good bottom line. Particularly their EBITDA has also been growing. On the back of stable FX, which was one of the things that affected them last year, which is now, we're beginning to see FX trade lower than 1,500 since sometime in September, right? That should also help them perform very, very well. So yeah, we still see MTN doing well, much more than they are currently doing in right now.
Investors to buy. I'm putting you on the spot now. So would you advise investors to buy, hold, or probably just take profits at this point?
It depends, really. It depends. They're not. That's not a one type of answer, because right now, if you're an investor like a colleague of mine that has held MTN as at when it was 196 naira, you might want to take profit now, right? So as not to be the greedy one. And if for people that just bought MTN 2 weeks ago when it was about 400 and something naira, you might want to hold on a bit to see the performance of the result. And so it depends on what kind of investor you are. Most importantly, if you're a long-term investor, of course, MTN is a good, very stable stock, a stock that has good fundamentals that you want to hold on to. So for long-term investor, when I mean long-term, I mean 3 to 5 years. Of course, MTN is one that you want to hold for that long.
Thank you so much, Abigail, for your time on this show. I'm pleased to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. After the break, we return with news updates making the rounds. Stay with us. Good morning and welcome back to Economy and Market. So we continue with news updates making the rounds. First of all, Dangote Group is taking a major step to expanding its oil refinery complex. The Dangote Group announced plans to expand the refinery capacity from 650,000 barrels per day to 1.4 million barrels per day by 2028. This is a development that will make it the single largest single-site refinery in the world and will boost Nigeria's drive for energy self-sufficiency. The chairman, Aliko Dangote, said the project reflects confidence in Nigeria's economy and supports the president's industrialization agenda. According to Dangote, this expansion will be completed within 3 years, leveraging the existing infrastructure such as the ports, land, and pipelines to fast-track delivery. The first phase of the refinery, which cost $20 billion, began operations earlier in 2024, and this project, the expansion, is expected to create 65,000 jobs and double polypropylene output to 2.4 million tons and upgrade fuel quality to Euro 6 standards. Power generation is also expected to increase from 500 to 1,000 megawatts. He also revealed plans to list the refinery on the Nigerian exchange by 2026, allowing Nigerians to invest directly in what can be described as Nigeria's most ambitious industrial project. Let's move on to financials. Living Trust Mortgage Bank recorded a 255.6 million naira pre-tax profit in the third quarter of 2025. This marks a 7% increase from what we had in the third quarter of 2024. Living Trust Mortgage Bank reported a pre-tax profit of 255.6 million naira for the third quarter ending September 30, 2025. This represents a 7% increase from the 238.8 million recorded in the same period of 2024. The bank's gross earnings surged by 110.9% to 2.1 billion from 998.7 million naira. This is driven by strong interest and non-interest income. Interest income rose by almost 97% to 1.5 billion, supported mainly by loans and advances, with non-interest income also growing sharply, with fees and commission income growing by 145% to 64.7 million naira. Treasury bill income doubled to 108.3 million, contributing to a total net operating income of 809.6 million naira. Despite an increase in operating expenses to 554 million, the bank achieved a net profit of 221.9 million naira, slightly higher than what was achieved last year. On the balance sheet, total assets climbed by 22.8% to 29.5 billion naira, with customers' deposits at 19.9 billion naira. As of October 2024, Living Trust Mortgage Bank is trading at a share price of 4 naira 1 kobo. We move on to Afreximbank, that is targeting a $250 billion balance sheet growth in 10 years. The Africa Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, set a bold target to expand its balance sheet to $250 billion within the next 10 years. This is according to the new president, George Elombi, who made the announcement in Cairo, Egypt. Elombi said the goal reflects confidence in Africa's economic potential, adding that the Egyptian president, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, challenged the bank to aim even higher at $350 billion. He outlined 3 key priorities: value addition and mineral processing, intra-African trade, and trade-enabling infrastructure. Elombi said Afreximbank will no longer finance raw material exports, focusing instead on domestic processing to boost jobs and foreign exchange. He then pledged support for the African Continental Free Trade Area and investment in digital innovation, logistics, and energy to strengthen regional trade integration. Elombi noted that Afreximbank's assets and guarantees have grown eightfold to $43.5 billion, with net income reaching $1 billion in 2024, reaffirming the bank's transformative mission for Africa's development. Then we'll move on to the news about oil prices surging after US and China reached a trade deal framework. Early on Monday, oil prices fell by more than 1% after US and Chinese officials outlined a trade deal framework easing fears that escalating tariffs and export curbs between the world's two largest oil consumers could slow global growth. The US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said both sides have reached a substantial framework that will prevent 100% US tariffs on Chinese goods and delay China's planned rare earth export controls as ahead of trade talks this week. Brent crude slipped by 75 cents or around 1.1% to $65 per barrel, while the US West Texas Intermediate fell by 71% or $1.2 to $60.79 per barrel. Analysts say the progress have helped to ease concerns over US sanctions on Russian firms Rosneft and Lukoil, which had recently driven volatility in the oil market. Meanwhile, Iraq is negotiating its OPEC quota amid efforts to balance supply. Despite last week's gain of nearly 9% for Brent and 7.7% for WTI, analysts are still warning that there are risks of an oversupply that may re-emerge. When we're back from the break, we'll move on to market updates from last week. Stay with us. Welcome back, and we're moving on to market update from last week. On Friday last week, we saw another surge in the markets, 75 basis point increase, 0.75 percentage basis point, as the NGX All Share Index crossed into the 155,000 mark. It's a new record high. Last week on Friday, the market gained 1,155 points to hit that new record high that drove our market capitalization to edging closer to the 100 trillion naira mark, 98.8 trillion naira market cap. We also saw some very high trading volumes, over 1.2 billion shares traded in deals worth around 16.775 billion naira. Mark, let's look at the top gainers for that week, for that day rather. We saw ASO Savings and Loans also continue with surge. ASO Savings and Loan up by 10% to hit a new share price of 66 kobo. Ikeja Hotels up by 7.89%. The company now trades at the share price of 20.50 kobo. Then Regency Alliance Insurance up by 7.44% to close at a share price of 1.30 kobo. Calverton Offshore up by 7.08% to close at a share price of 6.50 kobo. Since the group's announced partnership with NNPC, it's been a very bullish ride for Calverton in 2025. Then Aradel hitting a record high, a 52-week high, also a record high. Aradel now trades at the share price of 719 naira per share, up by 6.76%. We will not forget that Aradel listed on the exchange at a share price of 670 naira per share. Let's go to, on the flip side, let's look at some of our top losers for that day. Union Deconsult down 9.09%. So close at the share price of 8 naira. Nimet International Pharmaceuticals down 6.67%. Close at the share price of 5 naira 60 kobo. Cornerstone Insurance down 5.61%. So close at the share price of 6 naira 23 kobo. And Howden McCall, the real estate company, down by 4.84% to close at the share price of 4 naira 13 kobo. Then International Energy Insurance down by 4.48% to close at the share price of 2 naira 77 kobo. Now let's look at the top. We are looking at our most actively traded stocks for the day. Fidelity Bank also recorded significant gains that day. Fidelity Bank recorded 820.9 million stocks traded in deals worth around 16.138 billion naira. Sovereign Trust Insurance 45.483 million shares in deals worth 176.9 million naira. Tantalizers 32.674 million shares in deals worth 72 million naira. Access Holdings 23.752 million shares in deals worth 593 million naira, and GT Co also 19.18 million shares in this worth almost 2 billion, 1.776 billion naira. Let's look at the market during the week. The market during the week gained 4.48%. a new all-time high as we know it, 6,667 points gained, and the top gainers that week was number one, ASO Savings. ASO Savings went up by 32%. Aradel also up by 25.2%. Unicell Interlinked up by 19.73%. PZ Cousins Holdings up by 14.19%. PZ Cousins Nigeria up by 14.19% to trade at the share price of 44 naira 65 kobo. NASCON up by 12.77% to hit 113 naira 90 kobo. The top losers that week: number one, Living Trust Mortgage Bank down by 10.89%. Julie PLC also recorded a significant decline, 9.94%. RT Briscoe 9.84% decline to trade at the share price of 3 naira 30 kobo. John Holt down 9.72% the entire week, and Multiverse Mining Company down by 9.71%. On a sectoral basis, we saw banking index down the market. Banking index, the banks were the major losers of the week, down by 1.35% to hit 1,497.95 points. Insurance stocks were also down. Basically, the financial side of the market recorded significant decline. However, consumer goods up by 3.94%, oil and gas by a whooping 9.13%, driven by Aradel's significant rally, and industrial goods up by 10.61%, also driven by major gains recorded with Dangote Cement. And on the global side of things, let's look at the US market. From Friday, we see Dow Jones Index 1.01% growth, S&P 500 0.79%, and Nasdaq Composite 1.15%. And from Asia, we see Nikkei 225 1.35% appreciation, a new record high from Japan. Kospi Index 2.50%, and Hang Seng Index 0.74%. The rally in Asia is majorly due to the Asian summit that just took place over the week, with a lot of trade deals happening during that period. We saw the US make trade deals with a lot of Southeast Asian allies, and in Japan, we also see that Donald Trump is going to be heading to Japan later this week. European index, let's look at from Europe. We see that FTSE up by 70 basis points. However, the CAC 40 closed quite flat, and the DAX index also recorded a very marginal decline on Friday. On the currency side of things, we've seen the Naira stabilize at the 1,460 Naira to the dollar per mark, against the euro 1,696 naira. So basically, we've seen against the euros rally around the 1,700 naira mark. And against the British pounds is down from 1,950. It's now at 1,944 naira to the British pounds. And that's all we can take on economy and market for this morning. Thank you for staying with us. Have a lovely morning.